You know, it's nothing better than to catch a fish on one of your own tied flies. And that's what we're going to do in this video, is teach you the basics of fly tying. So come join me as soon as I land this fish for the wonderful world of fly tying. Hi, welcome to my fly tying den. Now I think we're going to start on what I believe is the most enjoyable part of fly fishing, and that's tying your own flies. We're going to start with the basic tools. And you may think, oh my gosh, all these different tools that are out here, it's just overwhelming. You really don't need everything you see here. We're going to show you the basic tools, and probably the most basic of all tools is the vise. The object of a vise is to hold the hook in securely while you tie on your feathers. You have to be careful, though, when you're tying, not to fracture, get it too tight, the bend of your hook. Let's take a look at some of the other vices. We have three vices here. This is a spring-loaded vise. It's called a Regal. It's very popular among the commercial tyers. And then we have a HMH vise, which is a rotary feature that can move the jaws, mainly used to tie some of the more complicated flies. But for the beginner, the cam-style vise is the most popular. And that's the one we're going to use here on this beginning fly tying tape. The vise we've selected is the A-style vise. It's really the most simple of all vices, and you can spend as little as $15 for a vise that's made overseas, or you can get an American-made one between $30 and $40. But the cam system, using the jaws to hold the hook and a lever to apply the pressure to hold the hook. Now, the more you pull down, the tighter it's going to hold the hook. And it is adjustable at this point, both up and down and sideways. A real good starting out vise for any of the tyers. And I'll tell you, another real important tool to have is a good pair of scissors. The important thing is to have a scissor that will cut sharply and continue to cut. Now, you can spend as little as $5 all the way up to over $20. Let's take a look at the scissors and their purposes. This is just a general fly tying scissor, made in Germany. You can spend $7 to $5 on it. This is a Thompson mid scissor, a good all-around scissor that's ice tempered, and a little bit larger scissor for hair work. This is a Thompson all-purpose scissor. This is a Swedish scissor that works very well with clipping hair. And if you're going to cut a lot of heavy-duty stuff, then just a cheap large scissor you can destruct in a short period of time. But now let's take a look at the points of the scissors. This is the key to a good scissor. You want to, first of all, make sure that the points up here line up even, just like that, and not separated. Now, if you start cutting lead and deer hair, you need a scissor with points like I have on the right here. It will cut it time after time. Both these scissors are self-sharpening. Now let's take a look at the whole scissor. You've got to check several of them out to make sure they have the sharpness. And you can test this by listening. Hear that nice sharp sound. The louder the sound, the sharper they are. Let's take a look at the finger holes. You want to get a scissor that maybe has adjustable finger holes that you can fit in your hand, because when you're tying flies, you don't want to be setting that scissor down each time. Plus, you need to grab the bobbin in your hand to be able to tie, and that's another tool we need to look at right now. All a bobbin is a thread holder. Give you the tension to tie your flies. This is a simple spring clip bobbin. Let's take a look at it. There's different sizes of tubes. There's a shorter one and a longer one, just whatever you prefer. It's adjusted by the spring, right here. Fits all your standard spools of thread. And it fits in the palm of your hand, just like that. We'll show you how it works when we get to actually tying flies. Another essential tool is the hackle plier. All your hackle pliers are the gripper for your feathers, to wrap your hackle. Keep a good grip on it. We're going to talk more about hackle pliers when we get into tying dry flies. You can do a whip finish with your hands, but there's been some tools that have been developed to help you do it a lot easier. One's a Thompson whip finish, right here. Another is a Matarelli, and this is a Crest. Each one has its advantages, and we'll talk about them later. We've been talking about essential fly tying tools. Now let's examine some optional ones that'll really help your fly tying. The bodkin can be used to put on cement
pluck out guard hairs from dubbing. Another very useful tool is a good sharp pair of tweezers, again, to rearrange dub bodies and pull out guard hairs. I think an important tool is a little bobbin threader, like that. Pull out your thread. The other end of it can clean out your bobbin when wax builds up. Hair eveners or hair stackers are really essential when you get into working with deer and elk hairs. And we'll look at those a little later on in the tape. There are a lot of tools that may not be essential, like wing burners and dubbing twisters and things like that. You may find them useful as you get on in fly tying, but right now let's keep it simple. We've just discussed fly tying tools. Now let's go over some of the materials that you're going to find necessary to tie flies. I want to give you a basic knowledge of these materials, and you're going to learn more about each one of them as we tie flies. First of all, let's look at hackle, because that's probably the most important material when we tie dry flies. And probably the most expensive is our hackle necks, as you see it right here. Now this comes from a rooster chicken, and this happens to be a Plymouth Rock, probably the most desirable of your hackle. And notice down in here, this is the smaller part of the hackle, and it gets larger as we go up in the middle of the neck. Very desirable for stiff, non-webby type of hackle, and we'll talk more about that as we tie dry flies. Besides hackle, we need body material. One of our basic body material is chenille. Use it a lot on our wet flies. Another one is dubbing, and it comes in a variety of ways. There's synthetic dubbing and a whole bunch of different colors, and a mixture between natural furs and synthetics. And then the old natural, this happens to be a hare's ear, and flosses, which we can use on a variety of our dry and wet fly patterns. Then we have peacock herl, which we use on the very popular Royal Wolf and Royal Coachman series. Besides body material, we have to look at wings, and wing material can come in a variety of different ways. It can be quills, like turkey, duck, and goose, or it can be hair, like deer hair and elk hair, and it can be dyed in different colors. Tail material can come from several different sources. For example, the hackle neck here. The larger feathers on the side, the fibers from that, can make a very nice tail. Also, a variety of hair, whether it be guard hairs from dubbing furs or moose hair, like from this patch here, or tails, whether it be woodchuck or a squirrel tail like this, or even a calf tail. There are a variety of different materials you can use for tails. You just need to try and use your ingenuity. We've showed you a lot of materials and tools here. We hope we haven't confused you, but it's all going to come together when we start tying flies, and you're going to understand this a lot better. So let's go have some fun. One of the most exciting aspects of fly fishing is watching a fish rise to a dry fly. Our very first lesson, we'll be learning how to tie a simple dry fly. First of all, we have to take a look at a hook and understand all the parts of the hook. This is the eye of the hook. Now this happens to be a down eye, and you can have hooks with an up eye. Most of our dry fly hooks have a tapered eye, and that means a little bit of a smaller eye for lighter leaders. From this point back, right here, it's called the shank. Then from the shank, which is right above the barb, see the barb right there?
That's where the shank ends. And from this point down to the barb is what we call the bend. This happens to be a model perfect bend, a Mustad 94840 hook. Good hook to start out tying flies. Now, from the point right here, see this little point, the one you poke your finger with, to this point right here at the shank is what we call either the gap or the gape. This is very important because this is how we're going to size some of our hackles. Let me show you how to put the hook in the vise. You slip the bend of the hook in, then with one motion pull down on your clamp. Then test it. If it's a little too loose, then add a little bit more pressure. It should be parallel to your tying bench. Now notice the point of the hook here. Don't put it inside your jaws. It's an easy way of fracturing off the point. And especially when you start tying smaller dry fly hooks, you will find you'll have a problem. You need that point exposed. And you might say, hey, I'm going to snap my thread off, but we'll teach you how to keep from doing that. Now I'm going to show you how to load your bobbin and get started with fly tying. The thread goes right in these little brass knobs there. Snaps right in, run it through your bobbin threader, you're ready to go. Bobbin should lay right in the palm of your hand. Should grip it, the spool and the bobbin, just like this. Now notice that I'm pulling the thread through and the spool is slipping. To tighten that, you can press these little spring wires in like this until you get that tension. Now when you tie, when you add tension, you grip the spool like this and it stops. Let the tension release, just release on your fingers, just like that. Now let's lay some thread up on our hook and let's get started. But first of all, you should check your bobbin. You should do this before you buy it to make sure that it doesn't cut the thread. I'll tell you, that's a very frustrating part of fly tying, is breaking your thread, and you don't need a bobbin to help you. Now, I tell you, now we've got it's kind of a funny motion here. Grip your thread with your left hand, and in your right hand, hold your bobbin. Now, we're going to kind of position this and lay it right on top of the hook here, just like this. Now, you notice it's kind of sliding, and you'll do that, but if you shorten your positioning down, so you have just a little bit of thread, lay it on top of the shank. Just like that. Raise your bobbin up and wrap back towards the bend. Just like that. Now you're going to do a little of this, and it's going to slide, but after a few times of practicing, you'll get it. Now, see this little point here? Boom, that's going to happen. Now, how do you eliminate that? Well, you just try again. Lay it on top, wrap to the back. Now, notice how I'm wrapping when I come to the back here. It isn't straight up and down like that. We have to wrap back underneath the point. One of the most important aspects of tying dry flies is to watch your proportions. The proportion is the key to tying a dry fly. Now let's take a look at the first proportion, is how much thread do we lay on the hook? Well, we've made our first mistake. We've gone a little too far. What we've got to do is get back to being halfway down the shank. This is important when we start tying in our hackle and tail. Okay, now we're ready. From this point to that eye, right down there, just about halfway down the shank. Now we have to select some tail material. We're going to tie a very simple dry fly called a gray hackle peacock. Now there are several materials that we can use. We can use hackle off of a neck, or we can use hair. This happens to be moose hair. So what we're going to do for this first fly, we're going to try some hackle. From the edge of the neck, we've taken one of the larger feathers and plucked it out, just like that. Between our thumb and our finger, just like this. Now pull it off. Grip it, make sure it's nice and even. See that? Happens to be a barred rock grizzly hackle. We're going to need to trim it right here. Now this coordination between the hands, back and forth, is something you're going to have to practice a lot because you'll be doing a lot in fly tying. Now, first proportion is how long do we want to make our tail? Okay, from the eye to the bend, that's the shank, so it's about the length of the shank. Going to move it down the hook. Notice my fingernail there. Notice the bend of the hook. Notice the point down here. Going to lay it so that the fingernails of my finger right there line up with the barb of the hook. Going to change hands. See, we've got our hands right here laying on top of the vise. Okay, there we go. Now that proportion should be just about right. Go right up, follow your scissor points so it's nice and even with the thread, where you've ended your thread. Look at that. Here we go. Trim. Okay, see, halfway up the shank. Now here comes a very frustrated part of fly tying. Here comes the thread, and it's going to do that on you. See how that twists? Whoops. Way to eliminate that is to make a loop and just pull down, just like that. Then wrap very loosely forward towards the bend of the hook. And there you go, you have your first tail. Now, one way to check to make sure you've put it on tightly is to see if it's going to twist on you. It looks pretty good. I think we've got her down. Now, let's take a look and see where our thread is. See our point right here? We're right where the barb ends. Now we got to put on some body material. Since this is a gray hackle peacock, we can use this really nice peacock Earl, a very fishy looking material. We're going to pull out, about 5 or 6 strands of it. Kind of give it a little pull like this. Get nice and fluffy. Going to trim. Now we're back to putting our hand on top of the vise and laying it down. Now watch this. Here we go again. See, it's going to start twisting on you. Go back towards your finger. Now you can actually form a loop with your finger. See how I'm holding it? Just let it slide down. Now once you've got that gripped, so you can work it. Now, one of the things you got to be careful, and this is going to happen to you, is notice this. See this right here? We've gone too far. We're not halfway down our shank. Now you can say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to cover that up with thread. Well, it's a good way to screw up your proportion. So we're going to trim it right there and make sure that we're only halfway down. Now you may have to unravel that. Let's go back to the end of our barb right there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to come back again and tie it in real good. Okay, now let's get all the little peacock together. And whoops, see that little point right there? That can cause you a little bit of problems. We're going to wrap this forward. Just like that. Now, where are we going to stop? Well, we're going to stop halfway down the hook, right where our thread ended. Now you say, whoops, wait a minute, Jack, back up, back up. What did you do there? Well, we're going to show you. And what you're going to do is do a little hand switching here. You've got the materials in your right hand. The bobbin is laying down there just like that, holding the tension. What we're going to do is switch hands from our right hand to our left hand and go under the material and tie up just like that. Very simple. Then we're going to trim off our materials just like that, and we're on to tying hackle. Hackle is a very important part of our dry fly. Let's examine hackle. This is a dry fly neck. Comes off of a rooster. Right down here at the nape, where you're going to find your small hackles for your size 18s and 20s. As you go up the neck, up into this range in the neck, you find your larger hackle. And to check out the quality of a neck, when you look at it, turn the hackle and see the amount of web. And let's take a look and see what web is. This web right here, it's soft. This is what we use for wet flies. As we get farther up the hackle, it gets stiffer up in this point. Here's one that we've trimmed all the web out, although there is a slight amount of web still right in here. You'll never get rid of all of it. This is the vein of the hackle. See how much thicker it is as we go down to where it's attached to the neck. We'll turn it here and you can see the stiffness of the neck. And again, very little web towards that point. Now let's show you how to size a hackle. To size a hackle, you can always look at it, but one easy way is to use a tool. This is called a hackle master. This fits right in your vise, and you can put your hackle right up to it, bend it over, and see where the tips hit, and you've got your size. You can do this for whatever amount of flies you want to tie. You're going to tie a dozen? Hey, select out enough hackle to do the job, and go on to tying. Now that you've seen what a quality hackle is, one without a lot of web, real narrow and long, let's look at some of the colors. As you can see, there's a great variety. Grizzly and cream and blue dun. You'll also get acquainted with saddle patches as you tie larger dry flies and, of course, some of your wet, such as woolly buggers. Here's another color. Now, this is a variegated color. Saddle patches can be used for larger dry flies. On certain parts of the patch, it can be very stiff. Also, the spade hackle right in here can be used in winging. Now let's get back to tying dry flies. Now we've selected 2 hackles that are already sized and ready to put them together. What we're going to do is have both the glossy sides are looking right at us, and we're going to match them. We're going to meld them together just like that. To the tips right there, those little tips match. They're equal. It's like one feather. Now we got to take out that fluffy stuff to get down to the nice stiff hackle. We're going to put it right up on top of the hook here. And you can see this hackle's looking at us, and that's the glossy side. It's looking straight at us. We're going to switch hands. Here's the old switcheroo here again. And check and see. Whoop, that's still soft. Let's get this down. Get all that soft stuff out of there. You want a nice, stiff dry fly. Now notice, I have the veins right there. See them? We're going to tie them in. Now notice the angle. See my thumb right here. I'm going to roll this in. See the body right there. See the thread. It's not clear back down in here towards the eye. It's right at the end of the body. In one motion, we're going to lay that barb right on the top of the thread. See that? We're going to tie it down. Now, what should it look like? Now, I notice that I'm moving forward. So let's take a look at it. See this? It's still glossy, and it's still looking at it. It's not down here. It's not over here, but it's right up on top. Now, we're going to tie forward. We've got to make sure that we do not push our thread right up to the eye. We have to leave room to tie off our head. Now, the moment of truth. Time to wrap your first hackle. I'm going to pull this down and attach our hackle pliers. Now we have an English style plier here. And notice our thumb and our finger is following it right down. We're going to get a good grip. Don't get it right on the end of the hackle there. Test it out. Make sure you have a good grip. Plenty of hackle there. Now we're going to wrap our first wrap. Now, this first wrap, you want to make sure it's tight. Here we go. Now, do not wrap all of the hackle right at the back here. You want to move it evenly forward towards the eye. Now, one of the hard parts of wrapping hackle is a lot of people try to wrap hackle at an angle like this. And see how it's flat? What we've got to do is wrap it straight up and down. Now, that'll be your assignment, folks. Straight up and down. Notice that we're switching the hackle pliers over to the other side, using our fingers to move it along of our left hand. Now my hand is right on top of the vise here. Okay, now we're going to pull back a little on the hackle so we don't wrap any of the other hackle fibers forward as we're tying. There we go. Notice our thread where it's at. It's right there at the end, and we've got room. See the shining part of the hook there. There we go, pulling back. Nice up and down. Now, we're going to tie off. Here we go. We're going to switch hands. Notice how I use the fingers of my left hand to move the bobbin over to the other hand. I'm going to tie it down. Just like that. Now, with this thumb, we're going to take that and trim it in. Whoop, there goes our hackle pliers. We pick them up, take out. We're going to take out that little tip. Now, you can save those and use them for wings. We'll show you how to do that in just a little while. Now, here we go with the second hackle. Notice how I'm pulling it underneath the fly here. Again, attaching our hackle pliers. And then we're just going to follow the other hackle and just kind of cover up there. There we go. You might want to use your finger there to fluff up the hackle a little bit. And we're to the end. Now notice that we have room right there. Plenty of room to tie off our hackle. We're going to pull back on it. Again, we're going to switch hands and tie it off. Now, this is a time that a lot of people get in trouble. They come in and cut the hackle. Now, and you know what happens? They cut the thread too. We do not want to do that. So we're going to use our thumb to guide our scissors in and leave our hackle pliers out of the way. There we go. Let's use our thumb again to cut off some of the excess hackle fibers that we've tied down. Now we're going to pull back on the thread, hold the hackle back, using our hand to be our hackle guards. Again, using our thumb to trim off. Now we're going to have to tie the thread off. If you're a beginner, I think this is an important point. We're going to make what they call a half hitch before we start doing our whip finish. Now it's time to tackle the Matarelli whip finish. This is what we got to do. Got a little bit of a hook right down here. See that little hook and there's a little indentation? Going to get it right in there, just like that. Got our bobbin in our left hand. Going to twist it slightly, and there's a hook right up here. This little hook will grab onto the thread. Then it's a matter of bringing up our bobbin, just like that. We're forming a triangle there. And with that triangle, we're just going to spin it around, just like that. Adding a little thread. Okay, now we're going to take this finger right here and hold it down and just do that little number, just like that. Not hard. Now, here comes the critical time. Bringing in your scissors and cutting off your thread. Just like that. Now let's take a look at our dry fly. Whoops, we got a little bit of a hackle. See it right there? Got to get rid of that. So we use our thumb to guide our scissors and trim it off. Now, buff up our hackle here. Let's look at our proportions. What the object is to get that nice 45-degree angle. There's our gap right there between our point and our body. The hackle's extending down just about a half a gap. See that right there? Half a gap. And that's your standard dry fly hackle length. Now the object of any kind of dry fly is to get a nice neat head here. So it's not, the hackle's not pushing right up to the eye. Notice that the thread is not covering the eye. And you can use your scissor points to check that out, see? All right, nothing in the eye of the hook. We can tie our leader on, and the only thing we need to do now to change this fly is to add wings right here. And we'll show you that a little bit later in the tape. The woolly bugger is a very popular wet fly. It can imitate leech patterns or a variety of different types of nymphs. And it's a basic wet fly, so we're going to tie it. Now let's examine a wet fly or streamer hook. This is a 9672 Mustad. It's a little heavier wire than your dry fly hooks. You can see it's more substantial. The shank is 3x long compared to the 1x dry fly hook. The eye of the hook is a little larger. While it's still a tapered hook, it's a lot bigger to accommodate heavy leader. Again, your point and your bend remain the same. It's a model perfect. So we're going to get started here. Let's get some thread. Now we're going to use a little heavier thread than our dry flies. This is a 3/0 thread, a monocord. And we're going to get started. Now remember, we're holding the thread in our left hand, laying it on top, and then wrapping back. Oh, so we're getting a little better here, see? Hey, how about that? Now we're going to go back to that point right there where the barb starts. That's where we're going to start with our tail. Now this particular fly has a little longer tail than a dry fly. You use a little marabou here. Look at that marabou. And this could be a variety of different colors. We're going to tie an olive one. I'm going to tie that on now. A lot of people say, what length should it be? Well, we're going to start off approximately 1.5 times the length of the shank. Here we go. I'm going to tie it in. Now, this is just like tying in your tail. And I notice a lot of fluff there. Once you get a few good wraps in, let's trim this out of the way so it doesn't get confusing. Again, notice that I'm using my fingers to guide my scissors along here. Now, every once in a while, you're going to end up trimming that thread. And if that happens, or you hit the point like this and you break it, don't restart the fly and pull all that off. Just grab your thread, just like this, and wrap back over it, just like you were starting another fly. There we go. A lot of times, this is why we use a wax thread, because the wax thread will hold the material in place until you can get another wrap of thread on it. Now let's go back here and wrap this in, tie it down. The key to a good wet fly is making sure that you do have it tied in well. Now we're going to add a little touch to this. It's going to be a little crystal flash. And this is a little kind of like a tinsel. It's kind of a dressing that adds a little sparkle to the fly. You know, it's kind of like chicken soup. We don't know if it really helps or not, but it can't hurt. Okay, now it's time for a body. And let's get some chenille. This chenille is a very insect-like material once it gets wet. It's used a lot on wet flies, not so much on dries. We're going to take a little of that off. See, I've taken some of the fibers off there, and you can see some of the thread there. Now we're going to tie it in right to that thread, just like that. All the way back. Now let's check where our body should be. It should be right up from the end of the barb there. Now we're going to wrap forward a little bit. If you're at all worried about your thread getting loose there, you can always add a 1/2 inch in there to hold it. But that's what your bobbin's for. Your bobbin there is to hold your thread tight. Next come the hackle. And we've picked a saddle patch here, and we've looked in the patch to get a soft feather. Let's take a look at this feather. And you can see it's got a lot of web in it. And this is what we want for our wet flies. You can use neck hackle, but you've got to make sure that it's soft. Now, since this is a wet fly, we're going to be tying it wet style. In other words, that light side, there's the glossy side, the darker side, and then the light side. I'm going to tie the light side in. Take a little of that fluff off. And again, we're going to roll our thumb in, just like this. And you can notice that I've got a long vein there. It's easy to pick up that way. Okay, we're going to wrap it down. We can start even back here and then come forward. Just like that. Wrap over real good. Now, if we would want to add lead to this fly to make it weighted, we would do it prior to tying any of this material on. We'd add the lead on. And that's what adds the weight if you want to get it deep. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to come forward now. Right to about that point. Leaving room to tie off the head. Now, we're going to pull up on our chenille and wrap our hackle right behind our hackle, right like this. Be careful not to pull any of your marabou forward. There we go. We're wrapping forward. Notice I'm keeping the hand on the vise. Just easier to wrap that way. You can use different widths of chenille depending on how thick a body you want. This happens to be a large, and we're tying a number 8 hook. I'm going to tie it off just like we showed you before. Let's back up, give you one more look here. I'm going to switch hands and tie it down. Now, chenille's a little thicker, so you got to give it a couple good wraps. And when you trim it, got to come in there and keep trimming till you have it trimmed off very nicely. Want to make sure that you don't get any material in that eye. Now it's time to wrap our hackle. First of all, we're going to pull the hackle underneath the hook and wrap one wrap by hand. Now we're going to attach our hackle pliers. I'm going to check it to make sure it's tight. I'm going to start our wrapping. Again, straight up and down. I'm going to position it equally and keep wrapping. Moving forward. Now that we're at the front of the fly, it's time to tie our hackle off. There we go. Now you're going to get some stray hackle. Now this is an easy one to cut because you can just pull it up like this and then trim. In fact, it's better to pull it up so you don't trim the hackle underneath and get in your eye. Now we're going to tie our head. Use our thumb to help trim the eye again. Sure there's no material in it. And we'll finish off our head. Time to add our whip finish. Again, start out. Make sure we get it set up properly. Form our little triangle. And off we go, just like that. Remove it, follow it up. Trim. And it's time to complete the fly by adding some head cement. That's where your little bodkin comes in. Little drop of that in the right on top of the thread. Make sure you do not get it in the eye. And a very cold day out there, you may be trying to get that leader through and find cement in it. This will help make the fly a lot more durable. Now, what can you do with the woolly bugger? Well, you can change the chenille color, you can change the hackle color, and you can change the length of the tail. It can be as short as that, or it can be as long as what we have here, or thinner, or you can add and make it thicker. It's totally up to you. A woolly bugger is one of the most versatile wet flies. Now we're tying a version called the woolly worm. Basically all it is, the woolly bugger with a different tail. Been around for a long, long time. Probably one of the fastest flies that you can tie. Remember our friend, the little gray hackle peacock? Well, now we're going to tie the wet fly version. Notice that we have peacock herl right here. We've tied in a little small gold pencil. We're going to wrap our body, just like we did before. We're going to go a little farther this time. Since we're tying the wet fly version, we're going to go about 2/3 of the way up the shank. Going to trim it off, tie it in real good. Let's look at some gold ribbing. I'm going to teach you how to rib a fly. This will add segmentation. Tie it in the ribbing. Here we go. We're going to go up and around. I'm going to try to space it as evenly as possible. There we go. We tie it the same way we have the rest of our fly. A little peacock here will look like segmentation. Now it's time to wrap some hackle. We're going to use a softer hackle, and we're going to turn it. Remember before in our dry fly version, we had the glossy side facing us. Now we're going to turn it around so we have a softer hackle. A lot of different types of hackle you can use. Hen hackle works excellent. Or you can take a softer neck hackle. Here we go. We're going to tie it in just like we did before. Same way we tie it on top of the hook. And move forward. Pull it down. Get our hackle pliers. Don't need a lot of hackle on a wet fly. A couple, 3 wraps will do it. I'm going to tie it off like this. Now notice I'm pulling the hackle to the back. I'm going to trim. Make a few more wraps. Now we could end the fly right here. And this would be the basis of a lot of the old style wet flies. We could add soft partridge hackle, grouse hackle, a variety, even pheasant hackle, and make a soft nymph. But what we're going to do is tie a small streamer. You might say, well, wait a minute, you're just tying a wet fly. Well, what is a streamer? It imitates a small fish. Let me show you how we do that. A squirrel tail. Could be a calf tail or wing material that we'd like. I'm going to trim it. I'm going to need to even it up. Quick, easy way of doing that is put it in a stacker like that. Hair is now even. I bring it up to the fly, and it's time to measure. Notice the tail is quite a bit shorter on the dry fly version. What we want to do, kind of match this up. We do not want it to be so long that it's going to wrap underneath the fly and ride under the bend. So we're going to measure. We'll get it just about the way we want it. Switch hands, trim. Now, if we go tight with this thread, we're going to turn it over just like that. So what we want to do is make a loop, come down. Now notice that we've picked up a little bit of hackle. If you've done that, let's back off, reposition it, pull back your hackle, slip it in, measure again, wrap, loose now. Okay. Now, this is very careful maneuver. Lift up with your finger, trim. When trimming any type of hair, good, sharp, strong pair of scissors is essential. Let's go back and finish up this fly. Here we go. Now we're forming a head and working our way to the top of the fly. And trim out any of the hackle that might be in the way. We have a nice little wet fly. And it's the basis of all your streamers. All this little wet fly is a small streamer. Now where do we go with this? What kind of modifications? Let me show you. We've changed the fly slightly now. We've added a moose hair tail, dry fly style. We tied our peacock, but we've only gone a little ways up the hook. We left a little room here because we're going to add some floss. Now we trim the floss. I have this little section in here of red floss. Tie it off. Notice our proportions. We've only gone approximately halfway down the hook. See? Now we'll tie off our remaining peacock. Aha, you might say, this looks like the old Royal Coachman. Well, it's a modification of the gray hackle, sort of. Now remember, we put in the wing on the last one. But we also wrapped hackle in. But we're going to change things here. We're going to make a trude. We need a calf tail. Trim off some hair. Go back to our stacker. A lot of people out there might ask, is there any other materials you can use? Well, you can. You could put elk hair, deer hair, calf body hair. It's a variety of different materials. You could even use feathers like mallard breast, even synthetics. This is called trude style, the basis of a lot of our caddis patterns. In goes our calf hair. Nice and even. We pull it out. Let's check it. How much do we need? Well, it's kind of up to you. I'm going to position it just like we did on the last fly. Change hands, trim, again tie it in. Notice how I'm starting to make the loops smaller, getting a better feel for fly tying, not twisting it as much. But the key is loose wraps, then tighter wraps. Get a nice grip on the hair. It's hackle time. Let's select a couple brown hackle. Going to meld them together. We're going to tie them in dry fly style. Let's take a look at this. Pull off some of that old fuzz there. Trim our hackle. There's our vein right there. We're going to wrap our vein in. We're going to be kind of careful here. We're going to make sure we don't have those veins sticking out and wreck our hackle. There we go. At this point in time, I like to drop a little bit of cement wrapping this hackle, which means no mistakes. Just a tiny bit there. Just like that. One at a time. At your hackle pliers. Again, straight up and down. Tie it off. Go back and get the other one. Here we go with the other one. That's your hackle pliers. Now we're going to fill in, follow right behind it. Whoa, that's going to happen to you, folks. Going to break hackle. That's easy. You just go right back. Reattach it. Keep right on wrapping. Fill in. Just like that until we get to the end. And then we tie it off. Use our thumb to trim. Just like that. Now, we're going to whip finish it. And we have what's called a royal trude. Let's examine this fly. We've got a down wing. You can change the hackle. You can change the body to whatever trude fly we'd like. This is really the basis of a lot of our caddis patterns, which leads us into another fly, which is called the elk hair caddis. We're going to show you that. We've replaced the peacock with spun yarn. I'm going to wrap it forward. As we wrap it forward, notice that we've tied in a brown hackle and replaced the tinsel with gold wire. Now you can dub this, and we're going to show you how to dub fur in our next fly. Right now we find it easy at first to use yarn. Notice that I'm going close to the eye, a little bit different than our last flies. You'll see why in a moment. Trim it. Notice we have the brown hackle tied in at the tip. And attach our hackle pliers and carefully wrap forward. I'll have to pull our gold wire out of the way there a little bit. Wrap forward, right up to the front. Tie off our hackle, and trim. Now we're going to run our gold wire through the fly. Going to hold the hackle on when those great big fish hit your beautiful fly. And tie off the gold wire. When cutting gold wire, either use an old pair of scissors or way down on your scissor. It'll help save them. Well, we've got a fly that looks like a woolly worm, don't we? Tied it the same way. But we're going to change it a little bit. I'm going to add a wing and make it a dry fly. I'm going to cut some elk hair out. Notice that it's kind of a darker elk hair. You can use light, or you can almost use black. And some of the deer hair works very well for these type of flies too. So let's go and stack up some. Drop it in our stacker. Now, a beginner may ask, how much hair? Well, I can't tell you it's going to be 10 fibers, 20 fibers. You have to just practice, and you'll get a feel for the right amount of hair. Well, now we've got it all stacked. See, look how nice and even that is. Pull it out. We can hold it up there and say, uh-oh, wait a minute. Man, maybe that looks a little too heavy. We can pull some of it out. Now, this is a basis of judging your hair. After you tie it, remember what you did. Then you can go back and make adjustments. A little bit up from the bend on the elk hair. Trim it. We switched hands there again. Now we're just going to make a nice, easy wrap. Now notice how the hair flares a little bit. If you pull too tight, you break your thread. So we're going to wrap several light wraps. We'll take a look at it. And trim this little elk hair's head off a little bit, trim it up, whip finish it, and take this elk hair fishing. Nothing better than a wild trout. It's a Snake River cutthroat. Oh, beautiful fish. Let's take a look at nymphs. You know those ugly little bugs that you fish underneath the surface? Let's take a look at the parts. The tail, we have the abdomen, and the ribbing forms a segmentation. The wing case on top, the thorax, legs, and antennae. One of the most simple nymphs is probably one of the most effective, and that's the hare's ear. Let's tie one. We have a hook in the vise, and it's a 3906B Mustad. A little bit heavier hook than our dry fly hook, and 1X long shank. What we're going to do is tie on a tail. But before we tie on a tail, let's look at our material. It's simple. A hare's mask. Now you can pull it off the mask, mix it up, and you'll get your body material. Or you can buy it pre-mixed. First of all, we need a tail. We go to the hare's mask. We pull out some of the underfur. This is the underfur. What we want is the guard hairs. See that right there? I'm going to make that into our tail. All right, right on the top. I want to make sure it's not too long. We've added our tail. Now we've moved to the front of the hook. We have to decide whether we're going to weight this or not. And in fact, most of our nymphs will probably be weighted. And you can use buzz fuse wire, any kind of a light wire. Now they come in different diameters, and you have to pick the right diameter for the size fly. I'm going to wrap it up at the front of the hook by the abdomen. We lay it right on the hook and just wrap over. Now there's a reason why we have our thread where it is right there. Because what we're going to do is have our thread secure our lead. Now, at this point, you have to decide how much lead you're going to put on the hook. I'm going to trim it. Now, remember what I talked about before is to trim it way down on your scissor. Use your thumbnail to push the lead over. Now, how far down do we want our lead to go? Well, we want to really just weight the thorax on this particular fly. Again, trim and pull down. And wrap our thread right through our lead, just like that. You could add some cement there, right on the lead if you wanted. Okay, since this is the gold-ribbed hairs there, let's get some gold ribbing. I'm going to tie it in right on top. There we go. Well, now it's time for a new technique. It's called dubbing. I'll tell you, it can be frustrating to a lot of people. But I'm going to tell you something right now that can take the frustration out. And that is, do not put too much on the thread. If you put a lot on the thread and you start doing this, and it starts balling up like that, there'll be no way in the world that you can wrap this fly. But what we've got to do is learn to put dubbing on properly. That means starting with the clump of dubbing, but just using a little bit, your left hand, between your thumb and your finger, just add a tiny bit of dubbing. And roll your finger and thumb, just like that, back and forth, smoothing it out, just like that. And add a little bit more, just like that. All smooth. Now, some of the guard fibers are going to stick out, and that's going to add the buggy effect. One nice thing about a nymph, it doesn't have to be pretty. The uglier, the better. You can work on down your thread and add some more. The object of a nymph is to taper it. So now we're going to wrap it. Starting at the back here, wrapping forward. You notice that we're trying to taper it. So it's thinner back here and thicker up in here. I'm going to add some more dubbing now till we get up to where our thorax is going to be. Nymphs need to be proportioned properly. It's going to take some time and practice to get to that point. It's time for a decision. Are we going to make a wing case, or are we going to form our thorax just with fur? Well, the traditional hairs here could be tied either way. We're going to first show you how to just add more dubbing, a little bit thicker dubbing than we did before, a few more guard hairs, and just wrap it a little thicker, just like that. And that will form our thorax, just like that. And then we can wrap our gold ribbing right through the fly. It's an ugly looking fly, but it really works. But if we're going to form a wing case, let's take a look at how to do that. There are a lot of different materials we can use for wing cases. One of the most popular ones is turkey quill. I'll take a piece of that, trim it off, and let's take a look at it. Like that. Now, we're going to make sure it's not too wide. We can use our scissors points here and pull it out. I'm going to tie it from the tips in. Right up on top, just like that. Pull it back over the tail. Notice my hands on top of the vise. Now let's trim, make sure there's nothing in the eye. Go right back to where we stopped our abdomen. Now we're going to add some dubbing. Now you might say, wait a minute, we got like some legs. Well, we could do that. We could go to our soft hen hackle. Really perfect for wet flies. We could tie it in just like we did our hackle, just like that. It's got a dark side and a light side. Tied in wet fly style, just like this. Now, we're not really tying the traditional hairs there, but we're giving you the basics to tie most all of our nymphs. Now let's add some dubbing. Again, a little bit at a time. Let's remember what we did on the first part of this fly. Notice how I'm feeding it. Dubbing takes a lot of practice to get it down right. But once you get it, you get a much more natural looking body than you do with yarns or chenilles. It really absorbs water. Okay, here we go. Now, if we get this built up and we go, uh-oh, I got too much there, we'll just pull it right off the thread, just like that. Real easy to do. Now have our thorax belt. Now it's time to wrap our hackle. It's a little more fragile than other hackles, so get a good grip on it. And just a couple wraps is all we need. Now, this brings up an interesting point on a lot of caddis nymphs. This is soft hen hackle. As you can notice, it's very webby. And just a couple wraps at the front of the fly may be all you need to finish off your nymph. But we're going to make legs out of this, and we'll show you how we trim it. We're going to tie it off just like we did our wet flies or dry flies. And come up, trim. Again, make sure your eye is kept clear. Now, we're going to pull over our turkey or our wing case. Use our finger just like that to do it. Or we can wrap one wrap and then kind of position it by pulling it just like that. Once we get it in, a couple more wraps to be secure. And you might say, wait a minute, boy, that's an awful lot of hackle in there. Well, we're going to trim that out. There's several ways we can do it. We can trim to the top, just like that. Obviously, our case has matted our hackle down. We can trim underneath, or we can trim on the side and leave just a little bit of beard hackle on the side. But what we're going to do is wrap through our gold wire, then trim. Now, you might ask, why didn't you wrap the wire before you formed the wing case? Well, you can do that. Or you can wrap the wire right over the top of the wing case, just like we did right there. Now, what is that going to do? It's going to make that wing case a heck of a lot more durable, isn't it? And if you're going to tie scuds and shrimp, you'll need to do that when you put the wing case over the entire fly. Okay, we're going to whip finish, and then we're going to trim the legs off. There's our whip finish. And now we'll do some trimming. Right on the bottom, we're going to trim it off the bottom like that. We've demonstrated our nymph tying techniques from putting on cases, legs, forming thoraxes. Let's go back to our old friend, the hare's ear nymph. Now this is the traditional way, using dub fur as a thorax. We're using our bodkin to pick out some of the fibers to make it more juicy. Now we can add another touch to this and add some more legs using some soft hackle. It can be hen hackle or it can be neck hackle. And all we're going to do is put it right underneath the fly, make a little loop, pull it up, and then adjust by pulling on it to the length that we need, and then tie it off. Especially on a lot of your caddis patterns, it adds a little bit of legs, a little bit more to the fly.
Now let's take a look at some other nymphs and apply the techniques that we've just learned. Here's the original nymph that we tied, the old hares there. Here's a little caddis with our soft hackle, our partridge or hen hackle. Again, another caddis. Here's our scuds. Notice the wing case all the way across the top. A stonefly pattern, segmented bodies, wing case, very ugly looking antennae. There's a lot of these patterns are tied with the same techniques that we just did. Streamers imitate small fish that trout take. This particular streamer imitates a shiner or smaller fish. You can tie it. We've given you the basic techniques to tie this fly. This fly is a sculpin imitation with a clipped deer hair head. If you want to know more about tying deer hair flies, we have a video called Tying Western Trout Flies. In our video, we teach you how to select the proper hair and all the techniques you need to tie the hard Western flies. Tying Western trout flies will be a great addition to help you move on in tying flies. Now, I'm going to show you the basic move you need to tie the clipped deer hair bodies or heads. In the vise here, we really have basically a marabou streamer, a shiner imitation. But we're going to add some deer hair and turn it into a marabou muddler, a very popular sculpin imitation. What are we going to need first? Need some deer hair. It's got to be soft too, fairly hollow, because it needs to flare. Go back to our streamer here. We've selected some out. We're going to put it on the side right here. Kind of shake it a little bit with our left hand. Grab it. A little bit more shake. Now, see, I'm forming a loop right there. If I pull down real tight like that, I'm going to break my thread. So what we want to do is go tight, tighter, tightest. Just like that. We're going around on the other side now, since we only have deer hair just on this side. Can't stack your hair. Here we go with the second clump. Notice that our hands are right on top. There are two fingers right here. I'm going to press right up against the other head, the other ball. Again, tight, tighter, tightest. Oh, occasionally you'll break thread, but it just takes a little bit of a practice. Now we're going to pull around and wrap. Notice we have plenty of room to the eye. And we'll whip finish it. It's time now to trim our deer hair. Since this is going to be a sculpin, we want to taper it a little bit. This is where it's important to have a good, sharp pair of scissors. I'm going to kind of at an angle, just like that. What I'm trying to do is imitate a minnow. We're trimming a streamer. If you were going to tie a hopper or an irresistible, the principle's still the same. You just change the trimming a little bit. Now let's take a look at some other streamers. Well, all the streamer really is an overgrown wet fly. We've tied one, and the techniques that we have used will be used in tying all the feathered flies right down here. And of course, here's our clipped deer hair flies, our muddler style streamers. Streamers are really an easy fly to tie because they are larger. And streamers catch large trout. Tying dry flies is not as hard as it looks. The main thing is selecting hackle and learning how to wrap it properly. Now let's go to the vise and talk about tying a dry fly. Well, we're back to our old friend, the gray hackle peacock. And now we're going to work on different types of dry flies with wings. The fly we're going to tie is the Adams. I'm going to tie several variations of the Adams to teach you how to put on wings.
I'm going to use a moose tail. You could use hackle. There's various other materials you could use for a tail, but I prefer hair tails. I think it holds a fly up much better. Again, shank length, just like we did at the start. Tie your tail in so you're halfway down the shank, just like that. Now, from halfway down, right here, we're dividing our hook in half. Let's take our thread up a quarter of the way from here to the eye. This is the ideal place we want to position our wings. See that right there? To tie the Adams, we're going to need a brown neck and a grizzly neck. We're going to take the grizzly neck and take a look at it. Right down in here in the nape, we're going to select a hackle from one side right along the edge here and another one on this other edge. We're going to form a wing with these. Now down in here is some really fine hackle for tying small dry flies. You don't want to use them. The hackle on the side is not as desirable for your main hackle. Now that we've selected two, we notice that there's a little bit of a concave there. This winging method is called hackle tip wings. Let's put them on. Notice that I have the hackle between my thumb and forefinger there. We're going to pull this out and even it up so they're all nice and even right there. And lay it right on top. Now, proportion here. We don't want our wings too high, otherwise the fly won't ride right. So until you get this down, you're going to have to practice a little bit. Rule of thumb is approximately the length of the shank. We're going to lay it right where we stopped our thread. See that? Halfway between the halfway point and the eye. In other words, 3/4 of the way down the hook. Here we go. It'll lay it on top. Wrap a couple loose wraps around. Now you can kind of look at this and see, and you can pull on it. Looks about right, and tie it down. We're going to have to use our finger and push it forward, just like that. Notice where my hand is, right on top of the vise. There we go. Not too bad. And we're going to wrap back over that little bit of hackle that you had sticking out there. You might ask yourself, hey, where's the body? Well, we're going to add that in just a moment. Here we go. Pull up on the hackle, trim. Notice that we have plenty of room right here between our thread and eye. Now let's go back and add a body. Now remember, we were talking about yarn before and Earl on our first fly. I'm going to use some dub fur, just like what we did when we tied our hare's ear nymph. This is smoother dubbing. It can be synthetic, it can be natural. This happens to be muskrat. That's the traditional pattern. It's gray in color. I'm going to add our dubbing just like we did on the nymph. Wrap a little bit of it. Again, what we're trying to do is taper it. Add some more. Again, working it up. And we may even need a little bit more. It's easier to add dubbing rather than to have too much. There we go. Now, it's time to hackle the fly. We've already sized our hackle. Now, we're going to get them set to tie on. Again, dark side, right there. Light side, right on top of each other, just like that. You want to match up the tips so the feather becomes one feather melted together, just like that. Get rid of all the soft hackle. And we're going to tie it in. A little different than we did on the gray hackle because we have wings there. What you do not want to do is, see the little vein right here? Go between the wings with the vein. So we're going to trim. Rolling our finger just like this. And then put it right up against the wing, but not through the wing, and tie it down. Using a light thread a 6-aught thread so we can keep wrapping a lot of wraps. Test it to make sure it's in good. Now we go right up to the wing, pull them back slightly, and wrap forward. Notice that we have room right on the eye there. Now comes our hackle pliers. I'm going to start with the one closest to us. Notice the angle right here. The glossy side was facing us. Here we go. We're wrapping our hackle straight up and down. And the object is to get the same amount of wraps of hackle behind the wing as in front of the wing. Here we go. So the wings are right in the middle of the hackle. Again, notice where my hand is. Tie it off. And trim. Using my thumb, trim the hackle. Now that we've finished with the grizzly, let's pull off the tip and save it for another wing. Now we're going to attach our brown hackle. Again, make sure you get a good grip on the hackle. You can, on hackle, separate it out a little bit if you'd like, by pulling it like that. But good hackle will separate quite easily. Here we go, straight up and down. What we're going to do is follow the other hackle, just almost identically the same way, just like that. There we go. Now, lots of times your finger can come and be a great ally up here to move the hackle around, like that. Pull back a little bit, and you're at the end. Now it's time to tie it off. Again, use your thumb to guide your scissors. Notice over here that I was using this other hand to keep the thread out of the way of my scissors. Like that. Whip finish off, and we're on to a different dry fly. There is one of the most popular dry flies, the Adams, with a hackle tip wing. Now it's time to tie a quill wing dry fly. We're going to use the same pattern. What we've done is we've matched 2 duck quills and cut a wing segment out of each side. Just like in our hackle tip, we've matched them together. There's a light and a dark side. Notice that there's a concave, just like this, side of the wing. If we're going to tie a wet fly, wing made out of a quill would be just like this. Same principle of tying the muddler minnow streamer. But we're going to tie a dry fly style, so we're going to reverse it just like this. Again, notice with my thumb, there's a V shape. See the V shape? You lay it right on top, use our other hand, come right around, and as we tie it, we're going to push in just like this. And with our finger, push forward and wrap underneath it. And that's the kind of wing that we get. Trim it on the front and on the back. There's a very popular fly called the no hackle. It's tied without hackle, and basically the principle that I just showed you. You can find out more how to tie this no hackle from our Tying Western Dry Flies tape. Now we have the completed fly. It's tied exactly the same way you tied your Adams, except it's got a quill wing. It's the basis of a lot of popular patterns such as a ginger quill and a royal coachman. Tying hare wings. There's a lot of different materials you can use, from deer hair, elk hair, to calf tail, to calf body hair. We're going to tie a calf body hair Adams. I'm going to put it in our stacker. Give it a couple good taps. Oh, we see our calf hair. It's nice and stacked. It's time to put it on. Again, our length should be approximately the length of the shank. I'm going to turn it around, switch hands. move our thread from halfway to, again, 3/4 of the way, tie it in. Just like this. Now, you may find that this hair will twist on you. Again, let's go back and try it over. Make a loop. Calf hair is kind of slippery, just like that. Couple of little wraps, just like that. Move up, trim a little bit. Let's take a look at our length here. Make sure that it's right. I have a nice 45-degree angle. Tie it in a little tighter, down any excess. Let's pull it up and wrap in front. It's important to wrap in front of it so it doesn't slip forward. One mistake that a lot of beginners do is put too much hair on the hook. Start sparsely and practice and work up to the point that you feel is right. We're going to wrap our thread between the wings, just like this, forming an X. It's kind of an Xing pattern. Now, make sure that your base back here is tied in very well. When tying calf hair, you can add some cement, just a tiny bit, not very much, just right in between the wings, tiny, tiny bit. Calf slips easy. In fact, any hair slips easy. Now let's check it. Now there's a very complicated move. It's one of the toughest ones in fly tying to secure the wings. You go around it just like this, and that will secure it in much tighter. But just starting out, I wouldn't do it quite yet. Save that a little farther on down the road. It's time to complete the body, wrap the hackle, and you have a hair wing Adams. Let's take a look at it. Very visible wing, very popular, especially in heavy water. Same pattern, different look. Tying a parachute. It's just the same way that I started out the last hair wing fly. Let's take a look. I'm going to tie it in front here so we can make the wing stand up, just like we did on the last fly. Now, you notice this is calf hair. It could be a hen hackle. It could be a mallard breast feather. Anything with some amount of rigidity for a parachute fly. I'm going to pull it up, and instead of dividing it, I'm going to wrap around, just like the maneuver I told you to do on tying your divided hair wing. And you just keep going around. Each time you go around, grab the wing, keep it upright. Just a little bit. As you can see, right here, you have a little base of black thread. We're ready to add a body. And again, this is our Adams, so we're adding muskrat. But of course, if this was black gnat, it could be all black. Or a blue dun with gray dubbing and a blue dun hackle feather. Whatever you want it to be. Parachutes are very versatile. One of the nice things about parachutes is that you don't have to have the higher quality hackle, because it's just a different way the fly rides on the surface. We're getting it all set now. Let's trim out some of the guard fibers. It's time to attach our hackle. Again, we've melted it just like we did on all our other flies, glossy side facing us, right on top. Lay it right to the side of the feather so it's leaning up against the wing. Now take our thread and tie it in, wrapping up just a little bit. And what we have here is the vane, and it's going to help add support to that wing. Wrap a couple wraps around. We're going to put our thread right in front of the wing. Now it's time to add some cement to the base of the wing. It'll help secure the hackle. You can use a hackle plier. However, I like to use my fingers. You'll find it probably a little easier. But let's attach our pliers and then wrap our hackle around the base. We go up to the top of the thread base, then wrap back down. Now, how many wraps should you use? It really depends on how high you want the fly to float. Sometimes it's only a couple wraps. Tie it off. The next hackle I'm going to wrap with my hands, which I find quite a bit easier, and the hackle comes out, I think, a lot better. Tie it off, just like that. It's a perfect opportunity to show you how to use a Thompson style whip finish. The advantage of the Thompson style is that you can hold back the hackle. Works real well on a parachute. Let me show you how to use it. Start with your whip finish looking straight at you, parallel to your desk. The little hook right there, grasp that hook, and here you have another hook right here, a little bend right down in there. With that little hook, I'm going to grab the thread, just like that. See that? Pull back on your hackle. Let this thread slide right in to that little groove, just like this. And then spin it up. You got to tilt it up like this and spin with your fingers. Now, take your finger down, release the hook right here, then just pull up like that. And you haven't tied any hackle in. Two different types of whip finishers, the Matarelli and the Thompson style. Both do the same job. Both have advantages. Here's our quail wing, our hackle tip wing, our parachute, and the hair wing Adams. All 4 different styles of wings on the same pattern. And that brings to an end our lessons in basic fly tying. But the most important thing about getting into fly tying is having fun catching a fish on your own fly. In other words, the flies need only to be attractive to the trout. And that's the most important thing. And if you want to learn more about fly tying, read books and watch more videotapes. See you out on the string.